there's a huge misconception that I have just a few weeks to deliver on. But let me point you to an army of, yes, conservatives who have pointed out over and over this proposition that government does not serve the poor well. Let me try to introduce that to some of you and amplify it to those who've had an inkling that just maybe the government helps the wealthy far more than the poor. Let's give an example in urban Connecticut, where you can't possibly have a worse imbalance in schooling than that received by poorer kids. What? Okay, why? Suburban schools do better for their kids, and I don't believe that's the quality of the kid. It is overregulation in urban areas. Yes, you need some more tough principals and teachers who are empowered to discipline when they're tougher kids. And I do admit that's hard, that's going to crop up in urban areas. But because of government's laxity, especially people in my party, the Democrat Party, oh, you can't punish. We can't have truant schools anymore. Guess what? Truant schools were good because they got bad kids away from kids who wanted to learn. That's called standards, right? And the lack of standards among Democrat leaders hurts urban kids. Is the federal government any better? The federal government basically takes our money, sloshes it around, distributes some of it, and always as it sees fit. I implore Connecticut to get out of this back and forth sham. We are net losers, okay? Every year, Connecticut gives more than it gets back from the federal government. Now, in a big defense here, it might be close, but the get back comes to some very well-off companies, Pratt & Whitney, Sikorsky, Electric Boat. So the gulf is pretty big. We can take care of ourselves. State government somewhat, but individuals and municipal governments far more. Look what your federal government is charging you and me to do. They've had for a long time, $16 million a year grant for, listen, nursing workforce diversity. How diverse does it get? Nursing is about the most diverse in terms of nationality and race and languages than any other profession. Why do we need nursing diversity? Okay, unless you are trying to recruit more Norwegian Americans to the nursing profession, I think they've got it covered. We've had block grants. Block grants from the feds to the states and to municipalities at times. They build up an industry of consultants and software firms and publications devoted to mining grants. If something's good, it can be funded locally. You don't have to go through the NIH and all these Washington bureaucracies. And there are overlapping programs. When the federal government decides it does want to fund things, it funds 14 of them. And they can't get out of their own way at times. Now, some well-meaning programs at the federal level get redirected because some powerful congressmen are going to pervert them. Senator Burns out in North Dakota, he directed money for poor Indian tribes to instead, a very wealthy tribe, to their wealthy Saginaw, I think it was called, and instead of going to the schools for a poorer Indian district. Oh, by the way, that wealthy Saginaw tribe became one of Burns's best contributors for his re-election campaign. Fire services, police services, there are pockets in Massachusetts that got money, but not nearly enough, because it was supposed to be for urban protection, and instead it went to fixing stoplights in suburban Wellesley and suburban Newton, Massachusetts. There used to be an ARA, an agriculture program for poor rural counties. But once you had a few rural counties taking advantage, well, then all these other counties got into the act, rich and poor, so that over 1/3 of the counties in the country, over 1,000 of them, now became part of the ARA. So how good and how focused could it be? Federal grants create overspending. We need to be spending less. And for every good program out there, there's a problem with how well it's managed. Okay, good idea, still the execution is lousy. There was this weed and seed anti-drug program for schools. Well, it required them to go through a 74-page application. Oh, and once they were granted status in the application, there was a regulation manual. 1,300 pages! This is government. This is bureaucrats that want to expand their power. It justifies their existence. This is people who get grants who want to continue them, and the sort of status quo perpetuates itself because that's the easiest thing to improve, not a good new idea or a new group of people who really deserve funding. The mechanism is horrible. Please, in these coming weeks, rethink why government should deserve any of our welfare. I'm defining welfare as non-necessary functions. We do those as individuals far better than the government will ever do. And with it, Connecticut, with a funding of privately funding welfare, is going to fund the right programs to the extent that the people deserve it. Well-run programs get more money because in the marketplace of charity, and there is such a thing, they'll command more. They'll be able to do good because they are good. Poorly run programs, I should say, and undeserving recipients won't get much. That's the way it should be. Government has gotten in the way. It is time to get it out. I'm Stewart Greenstein, imploring you to help me undo this Gordian knot of federal and state largesse that does not help us. Thanks for listening.